George H.W. Bush, the 41st President of the United States who served from January 20th, 1989 to January 20th, 1993, and the longest lived American president in American history, died today at the age of 94. His wife Barbara passed away just past April. Bush had been in declining health for several years. Bush was born June 12, 1924. His father, Prescott Bush, was a longtime senator from Connecticut. When Bush turned 18 years old, he entered World War II. He served as an aviator. At the time, he was the youngest aviator in American history. He was honorably discharged in 1945. He married Barbara Bush, the former Barbara Pierce, in January 1945. And their 73-year marriage is the longest in presidential history, far surpassing the previous record, which was set by John and Abigail Adams of 54 years. Bush graduated from Yale University, and after his graduation, he and his family moved to Texas. That's how they have their Texas roots. He became a businessman. He became a successful oilman. And it was during the 1960s where he followed in his father's footsteps and tried to enter politics. I believe, if I remember something correctly, initially he tried to run for Congress but lost that race. But his political career would not end due to some political favors that Prescott Bush was still owed from former President Nixon. Bush was appointed, I believe, an ambassador by President Nixon, and later, after President Nixon resigned, President Ford, I believe it was President Ford, made Bush a chairman of the Republican Party, and later on, Ford appointed Bush director of the CIA. And it was shortly thereafter this, in 1980, that George H.W. Bush ran for president, actually ran for the nomination for the Republican nomination for president in 1980, where he ultimately lost to Ronald Reagan. However, Ronald Reagan, knowing that he lacked moderate appeal, chose Bush as his running mate, and of course, Bush served 8 years as Vice President of the United States. In 1988, Bush ran for president in his own right and was elected in an electoral landslide. It's the first election I actually really vividly remember. I have scant memories of 1984. I remember hearing on the radio Reagan beating Mondale by that ridiculous electoral margin. But 1988, Bush overwhelmed his Democratic opponent, Michael Dukakis. He won 53% of the popular vote, swept 40 states, and won the Electoral College 426 to 111. Bush was, in my estimation, an above average president. He became president at the time when there was great change in the world in a foreign capacity. Many nations across the country were switching to democracy. Communism was dying everywhere. It was capped off by the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. Earlier in 1991, Bush led the coalition that, of course, defeated Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And it was at this time that Bush achieved a 90% approval rating. He looked to be unbeatable, but there were trouble on the horizon for Bush. One of the main problems that Bush had was that although he was elected in 1988 by a considerable margin, his support was rather soft. He had no hardcore base. Also, his pledge in 1988 of no new taxes caught up with him when he did actually side with the then Democratic Congress and passed the second largest tax increase in American history. This upset his base. in particular the Republican Party base, I should say. And in 1992, Pat Buchanan challenged Bush in the primaries. Also, the economy was starting to go into a recession, and Bush's popularity slowly eroded over the several months. And by the time of his renomination as president in 1992, Bush's approval rating was down to about 40%, and it dipped to as low as 29%. And on election day in 1992, he was rejected by voters, and Bill Clinton was elected president. From what I understand, this election loss devastated Bush, and his political career was over. But he enjoyed a very long retirement, a retirement that would last a quarter of a century. And he had a very successful skying as far as political dynasty. Of course, his son Jeb became governor of Florida. His son, of course, George W. Bush, became president in his own right. And his son, despite whatever people can say about him, whether his ranking historically, his son did something that the father was never able to do, which is secure a second term as president of the United States, albeit by a narrow margin. In later years, Bush was afflicted by illness. I believe the illness that he suffered from toward the end of his life was, I think it was called vascular Parkinson, which affected the use of his legs. And in the last several months, he was in and out of the hospital with various infections and the gradual deterioration of his health, something that you normally see in someone who is 93 and then 94 years of age. But ultimately, late last year, matter of fact, I believe about close to a year ago now, George H.W. Bush surpassed the record which was set by Gerald R. Ford when he passed away in December 2006. In fact, Ford was the last president to die, and Bush was the longest living president in American history until his death tonight. And America has lost a president. Jimmy Carter is now the oldest living president at age 94. And I might do another video about Bush later on. I just found this out. I had went to sleep for the night. I just started looking on the internet, woke up and saw this. I had to do a video about it. So George H.W. Bush, the 41st president of the United States, dead at the age of 94. Rest in peace.